Hello Popcorn Junkies, and welcome to this, one of the probably the last reviews or two that are going to come in 2025. So will this film make the end of year top 10, or will it make the bottom 10 films of the year? This is a review of Knives Out, or rather actually it's called this, Wake Up Dead Man, a Knives Out story. This is the infamous franchise, directed, scripted, launched, conceived. It was the apple in his eye of Rian Johnson, the guy who also gave us The Last Jedi, and some would suggest killed off Star Wars. So this is the third outing in the Knives Out trilogy. The first film, Knives Out, obviously came out in 2019. The second was Glass Onion, and this is called Wake Up Dead Man. Now, I've been quite outspoken about the fact that I haven't been convinced in actually either of the first two films regarding Daniel Craig playing Benoit. Was he Swiss? Is he Belgian? What is he? He's a sort of, he's a detective. A gay detective, which I quite like that detail. It's a whodunit series. It's sort of in the vein of Agatha Christie. It has, with this third outing, we're getting quite used to the fact that we have quite a clear ensemble of characters played by an ensemble of famous faces, all of which could be responsible for a death around which each film pivots. The first film, my problem with the first film was that there was a huge kind of fuss and excitement, and everyone was, Ana de Armas was in it, and that was all exciting, and Chris Evans was in it with a kind of funky jumper, Jamie Lee Curtis. Again, there were great turns in the first film, like there are often great turns in any Agatha Christie whodunit. I mean, more often than not, when I think of whodunits and the Agatha Christie types, Murder on the Orient Express and Murder on the Nile, all that kind of stuff, I've really always seen them as a kid. My nan loved them. My grandmother loved those sorts of films. And I always found them intriguing just to see how certain actors would make the most of kind of often quite small parts. And so in a weird way, I think if anything was up for a kind of revamp, a rejig, a remix, a recycle, it's the whodunit. And I think there was a real opportunity with the first film to do that. And I think for the vast majority of people, I'm very much on my own with this. I think the feeling was that Knives Out, the original film, was precisely that. It was a kind of revitalization of an old type format, given a modern spin, very cinematic, brilliant turns by uber famous actors, comedic, funny, all this kind of stuff. I didn't find the first film, nor did I find the second film, anywhere near as funny as I think Rian Johnson and the filmmakers perhaps found them to be. I just didn't find them as witty. I felt they lent on the kind of almost pantomime-like performance of Daniel Craig, and so it didn't really work for me. Of the first two, I preferred Glass Onion. And the weird thing is, with this third film, I'll say it from the get-go, with each Knives Out film that I see, I prefer the latest one more than I did the first one, which is often rarely the case. It's usually the best is first and is diminishing returns. I'd say, and I think, I perhaps enjoyed this film more than either of the others. It stars Daniel Craig, as ever. Josh O'Connor is in here, he from Challengers. He was also recently in The Mastermind. This has Glenn Close in there. Josh Brolin in quite an embellished role as the priest. Mila Kunis, is that how you pronounce her name? Jeremy Renner. First time I've seen him since his awful snowplow injury. Andrew Scott, Cailee Spaeny. And when you get down to Andrew Scott and Cailee Spaeny and Daryl McCormack, these are kind of become quite small characters in the piece, but you realise they're very strong, powerful, effective performers, all of them. This is set within the context of a church, of faith. We meet Judd, who's played by Josh O'Connor, a former boxer. He's done time in prison, and so his faith, him finding his faith, is tied up with him, in a sense, kind of running away from his violent criminal past. And so the film starts with him sort of in front of a kind of interview board and them sort of sending him almost off to kind of shadow and be a seminary, if you like, or an assistant to basically Josh Brolin in his church led, and Josh Brolin plays Monsignor Jefferson Wicks. Now let's just pause on this. So and basically the whole film pivots around who kills basically, spoiler if you haven't seen it, who kills Josh Brolin's character? Who kills the priest? How does he die? He gives a sermon. We have all this kind of characterization in the preamble. We get a strong sense of Josh O'Connor's violent past. And the great thing about these films when they work effectively is whenever a character comes onto screen and into shot, you're forever immediately kind of almost MRI scanning them for kind of, oh, why would you have an agenda? Could you be into it? And, that's I guess, the fun that people get from whodunits. Now, I think what made this slightly different almost immediately was, I feel, the power of two performances. This felt different to the first two films because I didn't feel we were ushered into the ensemble cast so quickly. We spent time with Josh O'Connor throughout the beginning of this film and throughout this film. And I have to say, Josh O'Connor is slowly but purposefully and purposely climbing up my list of favourite actors. He's brilliant in this. He's absolutely sensational. And he brings a whole range of kind of depth and believability and authenticity to his formerly criminal kind of past that he's now trying to, eclipse with finding the faith and taking the cloth and becoming a priest and all the rest of it. But also that's coupled with, and I don't think I've read much of this in many of the reviews, Josh Brolin is excellent in this. This is probably one of the best performances I've seen from Josh Brolin in quite a few years. I know he's marked by unfortunate behaviour off camera in his past. I don't know whether that's kind of clipped his kind of ascendancy. He's obviously in things like Dune, but he really relishes this role and he really gives it some. He takes to it with gusto. He really kind of, gets under his kind of habit, his priest's habit. He's got a great big beard. He's screaming from the pulpit. He's a kind of divisive, manipulative kind of priest, and that's all good. You sort of buy into him. But he's also a priest who, there are some very funny moments, and this was a kind of key moment where him and Josh O'Connor, basically they sort of do confession, if you like, or they ask each other to pray for each other. And Josh Brolin admits that he wanks furiously almost all the time and everywhere, and he has to apologise for it. And so, I don't know, there was such believability and such attention to detail given to Josh O'Connor, Josh Brolin, and a moment clearly in the kind of, if you like, in the grounds of the church where Josh O'Connor threatens to punch Josh Brolin because Josh Brolin threatens to kind of punch Josh O'Connor, where it looks like you think, oh yeah, Josh O'Connor could clearly be a prime suspect here. But of course, the most obvious prime suspect in any of these films is rarely the suspect in question. So all that said and done, I think that for me gave this a baseline of Josh O'Connor and Josh Brolin, both the Joshes, gave this a real depth and believability, and I was invested. And actually, it's quite a long film. It's almost 2.5 hours. I think it was almost the first 45 minutes to an hour, where we were bedding in really with Josh O'Connor settling into his role in the church, sort of being the assistant to Josh Brolin. We then get to meet the congregation, and it's in the congregation that, of course, this format, the whodunit format, finds its kind of teeth, if you like, and has so many now sort of potential suspects, and we're kind of writhing around trying to work out who would not want what from who and all the rest of it. Glenn Close is in there, brilliant. She always puts in such unvain performances. She looks after the accounts, she looks after the bookkeeping. She's kind of historically embedded in the church. She's been with, if you like, Josh Brolin from the get-go. Josh Brolin, as I said, is wonderful, is this incredibly egotistical, narcissistic, demonstrative, patriarchal priest. We have Jeremy Renner in there, who's a town doctor, and I have to say, whilst he's struggling with alcoholism, it's awful, isn't it, when someone's gone through some sort of awful cataclysmic experience off camera. You find yourself, reluctantly but unavoidably looking for evidence of that, both in them physically and in their performance. But I thought his jittery, nervy, kind of a lack of assertiveness and attempt to be assertive was really believable. I was reminded again, though his character wasn't, I could have done with a bit more drawing out of Jeremy Renner's character. And I think that's a problem with that, actually, with quite a few of the other supporting cast members. I could have done with a little bit more from all of them. So Jeremy Renner was really good. Kerry Washington was fantastic, who was a lawyer in the group. Andrew Scott, formerly a best-selling author. He, again, tiny part for a guy who we know is such a supremely brilliant actor, but he was great. His career is on the rocks. So, and Cailee Spaeny is in there. She's a disabled former concert cellist, believing that Josh Brolin's Jefferson Wicks would be able to kind of bring back her ability to walk, that he would be able to engage in a miracle. Oh, and of course we have Daryl McCormack. Now, Daryl McCormack is the lawyer's adoptive son. But we also discover that there is another connection between him and Josh Brolin later in the film. But he's running around all the time filming stuff. He's a right-wing sort of content creator and influencer. And again, I think there was a lack of believability about the way he went around with his screen filming stuff. But the great thing about his character was you knew that in so many scenes you would potentially have him having been nearby filming stuff. And so we have the moment of death. And the moment of death is he goes off into a side room, Josh Brolin, and weirdly he's killed by a knife blade into his abdomen, and he bleeds out, but no one can see anyone in there. The only person who could have seen what happened was Josh O'Connor. He didn't quite see what happened. And without going into the nuts and bolts and the myriad kind of, did he do it? Did she do it? Who did it? What's the connection here, there, and everywhere? It turns into a classic whodunit spiral case. The believability of this sort of, the believability of most kind of whodunits is always up for questioning, isn't it? It has to be more sophisticated than simply it was him. And this really is a case of it being much more sophisticated than it was just he went in there. We discover that some of the more unlikeliest members of the congregation were perhaps responsible, maybe individually, but also perhaps collectively. What I really liked in this was the humour at times was on point. I mean, I thought the exchanges between Josh Brolin and Josh O'Connor were really, really funny. Josh O'Connor manages to do so much by saying so little. A lot of this film, a little bit like in The Mastermind, is him observing the kind of madness, if you like, of Josh Brolin, observing the congregation. And whilst we are introduced to each of the members of the congregation and what their particular, if you like, I mean, I think what this film does sort of suggest is that if you're in a flock, if you're part of a congregation, there's perhaps something lacking in all of your lives, which is a bit of a sort of downer on faith and religion. But this is also a film, curiously, that has faith and issues of faith and belief threaded through all of it. Because, of course, the whole kind of play, the whole whodunit kind of ornate whodunit labyrinthine puzzle, if you like, and people saying they did this or they didn't do this, all of it requires faith. And so when you drop then Benoit Blanc, that's it, Benoit Blanc comes in, Daniel Craig, you have a fresh set of eyes on a whole bunch of people who are allegedly held together by faith, belief, and a spiritual kind of connection. And what I liked about Daniel Craig in this, though I have to say, I find his accent diabolical. I was finding him at times more and more like Don Johnson, because he's playing that sort of deep south kind of guy, isn't he? I thought he was from Switzerland, but he's not. He's sort of deep. Is he deep south? Is he? I can't work out if he's deep south or if he's foreign. I thought he was. Does his accent change with each film? Anyway, so he wanders around. He's not convinced by religion. He doesn't have faith. And there are lots of kind of exchanges between him and Josh and him and other members of the congregation about belief. And of course, we're being asked as, if you like, the congregation that's come to see the film, to believe certain characters or believe the integrity of these faithful religious people. And then you begin to think, but given the fact that many of you in the congregation are in the congregation because parts of your lives aren't going well, could those parts of your lives that aren't going well be the things that have made you become deceitful and killed Josh Brolin for what essentially amounts to an extremely valuable, what would you call it? In fact, incredibly valuable gemstone, an incredibly valuable diamond that was in flashback swallowed by, I think, the father of Glenn Close. I mean, I'm not one for, I love a good plot and I love a good story, but I like strong emotional stories. And I think the thing that made this one stand out as different to the other two films was, whilst it wasn't deeply emotional, I just think the fact that I liked its setting. I liked the fact that it was parked within religion, it was parked within the church. I thought there was a lot of interesting script play, performative play, storytelling and whodunit play around ideas of belief and trust. You know, you could trust this character or trust this woman, and Glenn Close was more trustworthy than this character. And there's a wonderful moment, I mean, which obviously pays reference to the title, Wake Up, Dead Man. There's a wonderful moment in this where this film also toys with the paranormal, or certainly toys with the idea of a kind of angelic, heavenly, celestial experience, or even a rising of the dead, which I liked. It kind of, and they didn't overplay that. They didn't overpush that. They didn't press into that too much and turn it. It could have easily tipped into spooky, but it didn't. It just was curious. And so for me, I found myself really enjoying this. I mean, Maddie was in the house whilst I was watching it, as was Nez. I kept chuckling. I was laughing a lot. But I have to say, this film was really, the first hour of this film is carried brilliantly by Josh Brolin and Josh O'Connor. So you've got two performances there to really relish. Whenever Daniel Craig comes in, I find it lessens, because then we're in the business of him working stuff out, and you have to do that thing which they do a lot in Sherlock Holmes, which is we have to listen to the cogs of his mind, you know, monotonely. You know, and he paces around the church saying, well, and if you did this, and he went here, and I'm guessing, and I'm thinking. It's a little bit overbaked, but I think maybe now on a third outing I can forgive him it, and he doesn't distract quite so much. If there was any criticism, I could have done with a little bit more character building out and development around some of the other key characters, especially Jeremy Renner, especially Daryl McCormack, actually. We do get a bit from him, but I would have liked that too. There's a neat tying up at the end with Josh O'Connor and what happens with the diamond and who actually did the murder. But I would have to say that what you do see of every character, they're all brilliant. Even Mila Kunis, is it? I can never get her name correct. She's the local sort of sheriff. Everyone's really good in this. Everyone gives it their all. And it's not just played for, if you think of things like, what was that? There was that British whodunit, See You Here, or See It, I can't remember. It was set in a theatre. And sometimes whodunits are just camp fests. And I think the first Knives Out was too camp for me. The second one was still a bit too camp. This wasn't as camp, actually. Even though it was a murder in the church, it wasn't as camp. But really, for me, I think the thing that really pushes this head and shoulders above the other two films is really principally Josh O'Connor, because he's there all the way through. So I was pleasantly surprised by this. So if you've got a bit of spare time now, between now and heading back to work, or before New Year's Eve or New Year's Day, I would fully recommend this as a family watch. It's great fun, it's beautifully shot, very atmospheric, lots and lots of great performances, and a real indulgence to enjoy Josh O'Connor, Josh Brolin. There's a few rude gags about wanking, so if you can get past that. And I would give this, surprisingly for me, I don't think I've given the last two Knives Out films very high scores. I'd give this 88 out of 100.